Okay, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Roll Mangging for our new D&D campaign, 4th edition. That's right. As I mentioned, we're going to be switching off now every other week between Call of Cthulhu and D&D. And so this was our first week of D&D. And this is a campaign that is going to be run by our good buddy Ziggy, which is always good, always a treat. And I was planning on doing an episode 0 for this campaign, but the way time worked out, it didn't really happen. So I'll just kind of quickly sum up some stuff that's going on in the campaign, and then we'll get to the events of the first session. So this campaign is apparently called, I think this is the first campaign that Ziggy has named himself, is Avengers of Senethar. Senethar being the map of the name of the land that we live in. And I'll put a map that I prettied up in the description so you can see the map of Senethar. And so I don't have, actually, hold on. No, I don't have my phone on me, so I can't check the official description. I'm going to try and sum up this to the best of my memory. Basically, like 50 years ago from the present time of the campaign, there was like this great blight. Kind of like the Black Plague, something like that. It wiped out a big chunk of the population, and it kind of devastated the whole land. And the land was starting to slowly recover and stuff like that. But about 3 years ago, corpses... Well, no, I don't think it even was that. I think people that died didn't stay dead. Yes, it's a zombie campaign, kind of. Rather than just becoming, a zombie, brains and all that, they would die and they would come back, but they would still retain all their memories and most of their emotions, and they'd be a bit more... Really, kind of the best description is something like Dark Souls, like a hollow. Where, you as the player, you're a hollow, and so you still kind of remember your past life and stuff like that, but you kind of get progressively more and more hollow until you become just kind of basically like a zombie. So it's kind of like that. Now, nobody has gone... It's only been 3 years, so nobody's gone, like, full hollow yet. But there are, plenty of people around that have gone beyond the grave, is what they call it. And so, these people are still kind of integrated into society because they're still, for the most part, functioning members. So, pretty much, more or less, whenever anybody dies now, they come back as that. And unless under specific circumstances, like if your whole body is gone, or certain magical situations, you might not be able to come back, in which case you're just dead. And if you die, a second time, then you're just dead. Okay? And so, the great, villains of the land, and the ones that most people assume are responsible for this, for probably both the blight and for this undeath thing, are warlocks. If you go to the pub and you were just asking, you were new to the land or something, and you're like, how did this happen? Who caused this? You'd hear just, it was those damn warlocks. I know it. It'd be something like that. And so that's pretty much it as far as background for the campaign. Religion is not a very big force in the land. You're not going to find many temples around, and you're not going to find many devout religious people. For whatever reason, it's just kind of the state of the land, or maybe people abandon religion after the blight. For whatever reason, religion is not a big deal. And so instead of that, we have well, if you remember, Ziggy's big thing for the Artemis campaign, obviously, was the religion system, in which case, Artemis became a big part of that. He's replaced that now with a birthright system, in which whenever anybody is born, they have this birth sign assigned to them, I guess by their parents, which is interesting. I think that's how he explained. It's not like the Zodiac. I think that's how he explained it. Was like, oh, sure, this is our son Billy. He's going to be a Terraria or whatever. So I guess, yeah. And so mechanically, it just gives us a couple slight benefits. Nowhere near the religion system in scale. It's much smaller than that, like a +2 to a skill and like maybe a special ability. And so that's kind of what everything is. It's like the Zodiac, but everybody kind of understands it and acknowledges it and stuff like that. And so you can go up to people and ask, what's your sign, and blah, blah, blah. And it's actually, the Zodiac is very generic and bullshit. Here, it's actually like, I guess, like a concrete system. Because there's alignments assigned to it. At least as far as what Ziggy is given to us. And so, I imagine that's how it is throughout the land. Like, there's a lawful good. Like, you wouldn't call it that in-game, obviously. It's a meta term. But there's a lawful good birth sign, a neutral good, chaotic good, so on and so forth, all the way down. And so, that's got to raise a lot of interesting questions. Like, what if your effed up parents, like, assigned you the chaotic evil, like, birth sign? But are you forced to follow that kind of life? Or can you go your own road? Now, what's interesting is, if you don't go along with what your birth sign is, you become what's known as the signless. And it's real shit. Like, mechanically. Like, all the other ones, like, if you have them, they're just kind of minor benefits. But if you're signless, whenever you roll a critical fail, you roll a 1d6 and you lose 1 point from 1 stat. Which is terrible. But yeah, like, so, if your parents were just assholes, like, you could just wither away because you don't want to be chaotic evil. And so I guess you'd almost like force yourself, like, I guess I'll be evil. Ah! That's an interesting character now. I might have to make that as a second character. A character that's evil, but he doesn't want to be. He's forced to by this bullshit system. Man. Alright, I came up with my second character. Right here, I just thought of that. Alright, so that's the supplementary system to go with the campaign. Alright, so characters. My character, at least. I'm going with a very well-known analog here. I'm basically playing Frog from Chrono Trigger. He's named Frog, and he's a bullywug. And so, if you've played the game, or you've seen the game played, whatever, it's basically the same story. Like, pretty much exactly. The Magus was involved, Cyrus was involved, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't played it, I'll give you a quick summary of his backstory. He was a guy named Glenn. And I'm talking about for my character, not for Chrono Trigger. It's a little different. Okay, so he was a guy named Glenn, and he had a friend named Cyrus, who was a few years older than him. And Glenn really looked up to Cyrus. Thought he was like his hero, And, Glenn and Cyrus were both kind of skilled swordsmen. Glenn perhaps a bit more so. But Glenn was kind of afraid of combat. He was kind of a coward, and he didn't like hurting other people. Cyrus, on the other hand, quickly rose through the ranks of knighthood. He was pretty much just Billy Badass. He acknowledged that Glenn was probably the better swordsman, but Cyrus knew how to kick some ass. And so he wanted Glenn to become a knight with him, but Glenn just, he didn't, but he did agree to finally become a squire to Cyrus. So he could at least, they could at least be kind of together, but, he didn't have to go through the knight thing. And Glenn was perfectly happy, in that role at least, rather than being a knight. Because it meant, he pretty much just carried his shit around for Cyrus, but he got to hang out with him. He was his hero, And so there was this warlock issue, right? Warlocks are the great villains of the land. And so Cyrus, as part of this like an elite knight group, was sent out to kind of wipe up some remnants of warlocks. Most of them have gone into hiding, but some of them are still kind of more or less public. They're out there, they have like cults, and they're not good. And so Cyrus was sent by the queen or whatever to go take care of one of these warlocks, named Magus. Okay? And so, of course, Glenn went with... He was afraid. He was really worried about this. Warlock didn't sound like somebody you should mess with, but if anybody could do it, it would be his good buddy Cyrus. So they went out, and I skipped the stuff about the Frog King or, whatever, the hero medal. I just skipped that. And Cyrus was able to basically recover a legendary sword by the name of Masamune, which is just this badass blade of legend that is specifically almost designed to cut through magic users. Like, it can just cut through magical barriers and stuff like that. And so with this sword in hand, he's perfectly equipped now to take out this warlock. And so they finally meet the warlock at like basically the top of a mountain. Real climactic shit. And right, so they meet Magus at the top of this mountain, and it starts raining and the lightning's going across. It's very epic. And Magus has this lieutenant, his crony basically, his second in command, named Ozzy. Now in the game, I don't know what he's supposed to be. In this campaign, I'm just like, he's a goblin, because it seems like the closest thing. So he's a goblin lieutenant. And so they're both there. Cyrus and Glenn are there. And Cyrus started kind of tussling with Magus a little bit, but it didn't seem like he was making much effect. And so I think like Cyrus like charges forward, and Magus just like swats him away, and the Masamune like shatters. And so Glenn's just like, oh shit! Cyrus, the sword! And so Cyrus is just like, Glenn, just get out of here, Just get yourself to safety. I'll keep him busy. But Glenn's just like, he's too afraid to do anything at this point. And so, Ozzy just like taunts him, and Magus taunts Cyrus and stuff like that. And so Cyrus is just like, screw it, and he charges in again barehanded, which is pretty badass when you think about it. And so Magus again just swats him like even harder. And so Cyrus is just like laying there, and just like bloody and broken and bruised and stuff. And Glenn just rushes over him. He's got him in like his arms. And Cyrus is like, Glenn, look after Lean. Now, okay, so this is... Now, as a kid playing the game, I always thought it was pronounced Lean. It's spelled Leene, which is not a normal name. I always thought it was Lean, because it was Lee, But Ziggy now pronounces it Lenny, which is just a guy's name. So, I don't know. Saying Lean as a name doesn't really sound right. But I think for these videos, I'll just keep calling her Lean, because that's what I know it as. So anyways, Lean in Chrono Trigger is the queen. Like, and Cyrus and Glenn both know her kind of personally. In the game, in the campaign, the way that this worked out, it didn't really make any sense, so I had to change it to Cyrus's sister, which works just probably even better. And so he's just like, look after Lean, and then he just like, his body just like, in the game it like goes into flames, but that seemed really effed up, so it just like kind of dissolved, leaving just like his helmet, his cape, and like the shattered remains of the Masamune. And so Glenn just has like the hilt of the broken hilt of the Masamune in his hand, and Magus says something to him, and he stands up and he's like, and so Ozzy's like, well, why don't you give him a more appropriate form? And so Magus is like, sure, why not? And so he blasts him with magical energy. So Glenn's just like, and he falls off the mountain into like a waterfall or something like that, and he becomes a frog. So for the game, in D&D, the closest analog to a talking frog is called a bullywug. Ever since I read about bullywugs, I was like, okay, well, I could make frog. And so I finally did. And so after the events of that day, he went back to the city of Stanton, which is where Lean lives now, and he like wrote a letter explaining the events of that day and left it under a door because he doesn't want her to see his new form. He's very ashamed of it, you know. And so then he just went outside of town to the local swamp. He built himself a little like hovel, like a hobbit home in the ground, and that's where he lives now. And in the game, it didn't really make any sense, but I made it make sense here. Basically, when he got blasted by magical energy by Magus and turned into a bullywug, some of that magical energy retained inside of him. And so now he can cast magic. And so his official class is a wizard. He's a blade singer wizard. And so that means he gets magical abilities. He gets like wizard daily abilities and stuff like that. And but he also he's a melee character. And so that class just fit the best, you know, for matching it to Frog. You know, he's primarily melee, but he can also cast spells. And as a blade singer, he gets a special ability called Blade Song, which means he enters into like this trance-like mode, and he goes into like almost a dance for his combat maneuvers, and his sword just swings through the air so beautifully that it creates music. And so that's called Blade Song, which is very badass. Normally only taught by elves, but we don't really care about lore like that. It's just he knows how to do this for whatever reason. He's a damn good swordsman, screw you. And so whenever I enter Blade Song now, I play Frog's theme from Chrono Trigger. It's very fitting. And so he's pretty much just stays in his hovel outside of town, and he practices his techniques, and now he protects Stanton, the city, from any incoming threats, mostly caused, from the blight, or from the reanimation, or, stuff like that, any horribleness like that. Okay, so that's his backstory. So as for the actual character now, this is probably like the grimmest character that I've played. All the other characters were very optimistic or energetic. This character is not. It's a bit of a different style for me. For one, he's not charismatic at all. And he's very almost like a recluse. And that's not my style normally. Normally my style is to just be up in everybody's face, be the face of the party and all that. Frog is not that. And so that's interesting for me to adapt to. And he's completely ashamed of what he's become. And basically his thought, like, every day when he wakes up is like, it should have been me that died. You know. Because he was just this little piece of shit coward. Cyrus was like the greatest knight in the land. And Cyrus is dead and he lives. And it's just, he's like an abomination. And so, it's an interesting character to play, you know. And so the only reason that he still lives, you know, the only reason he hasn't just, you know, offed himself, basically, is because he made a promise to Cyrus as he was dying that he would look after his sister, Lean. And so he's damn sure going to do that. And so he's not a character that really works well with others, but it's not out of any, like, he doesn't like people. He just thinks that people don't like him because he's an abomination. He doesn't feel he's worthy of them giving him, like, respect. Like, he thinks he's less than human at this point. And so he only goes into town, like, once a month for supplies, and he wears a big, heavy hood, and he just pretty much ignores everybody. He knows that they gossip about him, they talk about him, they laugh at him, stuff like that. He just kind of just, you know, he's doing his job, he's fulfilling his promise, that's it, you know. And so it's an interesting character. Not, you know, the heroic, you know, Donnie McFly, I'm here to save the day, you know, he's just kind of like, he's like this, you know. And it's cool. Just, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. Because I don't want to portray him really as like, I don't want to work with anybody. Just leave me alone. Because you don't want to play with a character like that. You know, the other players don't want to be around a character like that. I just need to like show that he's very conflicted. You know. He just needs the right motivation, I think. Just like he did in the game, you know. Like, they showed him the Hero's Medal and stuff like that, and he's just like... And it wasn't until they reforged the Masamune by going through time and shit and be like, you're the only one that can wield this, you're the hero, and he was finally like, you're right. You know, it took a lot of motivation in the game, and I kind of want to reflect that in the campaign, but I don't want to be too heavy-handed with it, because we do want to kind of keep things along. And so I think the motivation instead is just going to be necessity. Like, he's going to get caught up in this shit that's going to go down, and he's going to almost motivate himself to be, you know, to fulfill his promise and be the hero that he really should be, you know. Okay, so that's my character. And the other characters, we have we have Donnie McFly, whose new character is named Alex P. Keaton. Yeah, I know. He is Donnie McFly in every single way except name. So I'm just going to call him Donnie, if that's alright. Mert is playing... I don't know. Oh, he's playing a warlock. That's right. He's playing a warlock. He's like, I'm not a warlock. I'm a hexblade. Duh. And I like ripped the sheet out of his hand. I'm like, W-A-R-L-O-C-K. You're a warlock. He's playing a good warlock. Bullshit. Frog will never believe that. If he finds out he's a warlock, he will cut him down. Yeah, he's playing a warlock. But he's playing a melee warlock, just like I'm playing a melee wizard. We have Gyro playing a elven ranger. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we have a newcomer, Glenn, playing a half-elf paladin named... I don't remember his real name. I think it was like Kavorik or something like that. But Ziggy couldn't pronounce it, so he called him Kill. And then his character is a captain of the city guard. So his name now is Captain Kill. As dubbed by myself. So yeah, he's Captain Kill. Which sounds like, you know, Dr. Doom. He sounds like a very cheesy villain, but he's Captain of the Guard, so Captain Kill. Okay, and that's pretty much our roster. Yeah. And, alright. Okay, so... Actually, let me just... Alright. I'm going to try to quickly summarize the events here. It was an interesting first session because I think Ziggy's been very influenced by Call of Cthulhu. He made a pretty a pretty big mistake. He started the campaign in a tavern. I'm not saying it never could be a good start. It rarely is. I've yet to see a good start in a tavern. And I didn't really see it here. No offense to him, you know. There's better ways to start a campaign than in a tavern. Find them out. Come up with them. There are better ways. You know, we've started on a ship. We've started in jail. We've started on the shoulders of a giant. Started in many different ways. They were mostly better than a tavern. But I don't want to harp on it. So we started in a tavern. The campaign started on the day that Frog was making his monthly trip into town, because, of course. And we're all in this tavern, the Rolling Barrel, and we're all kind of just sitting around. I'm just kind of like this at the bar, drinking my water. Because you can't drink alcohol, you know, because he feels like, you know, as soon as he drinks alcohol, some shit's going to go down and he's not going to be in the right mind. He's got to be always focused to fulfill his promise. Because, you know, if he drinks, shit goes down, and he can't protect, you know, Lean for some reason, that's like, how could you more betray the memory of your friend right there? He's not going to let that happen. Alright, and so a bunch of conversations go down. And so, trying to piece together this story, of which I knew almost nothing. Yeah, I knew nothing about. Before the campaign started over Facebook messages, this dwarf came to my hovel in the middle of the night. This, like, dirty-looking dwarf. And he was talking about, like, the end of the world at stake or something like that. And he tried to, like, I was just like, go away. You know, I was being very brooding. There's nobody here, go away. And I, like, cracked open the door a little bit, and he tried to shove this package, this bundle, through the door. So I just, like, booted him in the face, and he ran off. I was like, what the hell? And so that was it. Anyways. So this dwarf also went to Mert's house. And Mert was, of course, Mert, and let him right in. And I guess he gave this package to Mert, and he told him to meet him in town the next day, and his name was Logan Dunbar. And so he told him to meet him in the Rolling Barrel Tavern. And I guess he was not there that day, and so Mert was wondering what happened to him. Lean was in the tavern talking to Gyro's character, along with a couple other mysterious characters. And some conversations were going around, none of which I was a part of. Yeah. And at one point, Mert, like, looked in his bag and found out that the package was not there. And he was, like, turning around, and he saw a group of ruffians that were in the bar quickly leaving. And so his newfound friends, minus myself, that he had just met, they all chased after him. I had left like a minute earlier, and I went to the markets because I had to do my supply shopping. And of course, they were heading right through the markets. So they were all chasing him. Mert caught up to the little halfling that had stolen his package, and he grabbed him and grabbed the package, but the group was still running through. And so I see these group of ruffians. I know they're ruffians. They're running through. They're being chased by, apparently, you know, the captain of the guard. And so I just use my magic to create some icy terrain on the ground. This character is very not optimized, which is not usually my style. Artemis was optimized out the ass. Ovum pretty much optimized out the ass. This character, for one, he's a bullywug, which is terrible. But also, I took pretty much only spells that had an icy or a water effect to really keep to the theme. So I actually felt proud of myself that I did not go optimized. So he's subpar. But it's role playing, baby. So anyways, I create this icy terrain. They all slip and fall, and they get caught by the captain of the guard, who's a bit of a pushover when it comes to the law. If this were Ovum, they would all have been gored in the street by a big sword, but what are you going to do? And so I didn't want to be involved. I was just like, I'll just do this, to see that they meet justice. And the leader of the group, we eventually get into a little fight with him, because I like, the captain of the guard was about to let this guy go, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. So I just magic missile him. I love magic missile. You don't have to roll for anything. It's just 6 damage. And it's just great just for pissing people off. And so he's like, he looks at me, he's like, what is this devilry? And so I'm just like, it's frog, bitch. And so he charges at me, and I just like quickly dodge out of the way, and the whole group just like converges on this one guy, and he's like, all right, just keep that thing away from me. I've been watching a lot of Arrow, so I kind of feel inspired by that a little bit with the hood. Just got to keep that at all times. And, okay. So they finally convince Mert to open up this package that, the gang was so interested in. He's like, I haven't even opened it. I was like, wow, really? I would have opened it right away, but I didn't say it in character because I'm still just like brooding. He's like, he opens it up, and it's a book. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. And my passive arcana, like, I can sense that there's like a spell cast on this book. And Mert starts talking about the dwarf that visited him and all that, and I'm like, I too met that dwarf last night. I turned him away. I'm like, let me see that book. And so I touch it, and I roll Arcana on it to see what's going on. I roll a 1. Which is bad. It's not like Call of Cthulhu. No, it's bad. And so I basically, like, get a strong headache. I get, like, a flash in my head, a vision of Magus, the warlock, laughing and, like, shooting magic at me. And I get, like, this just pain in my entire chest. And I'm just like, ah! And I drop it. And I'm like, like, that's pretty rough, man. Like, just the book is evil. And so they start talking about it, and the whole group converges for like a minute, and we start talking about what's going on. And they arrest the leader of the gang, Jax. They arrest him, and so a guard takes him off to the jail cells. And the rest of us head over to the Thirsty Frog. Yes, there's a tavern in the city named the Thirsty Frog. And my character doesn't go there because he doesn't want to make it ironic. Of course, Ziggy put that in there just for me. And so we go there because of some connection, I guess, that Mert knew, or I don't know. I guess he had heard that. I don't know. We went there for some reason. And so we talked to the barkeep there. And we're looking for this guy, this Logan guy, who's apparently connected to this book, and he's not found anywhere. And the barkeep says that he hasn't been here. He heard that maybe he might be staying at one of the inns, but he couldn't remember which one. And so at that point, I was just like, all right, and I leave because I'm gonna go look at all the inns, ask around for this guy. So at this point, Frog is kind of conflicted. He's really conflicted. Really, he doesn't want to be involved in any of this. He doesn't like being in town for any longer than he needs to be. He doesn't like working with other people because it's just going to end badly. But he knows that this is important shit. This is stuff that could affect, the city and, lean. This is a book that this guy came to his hovel in the middle of the night to try to give him. And he just had a vision of Magus when he touched it. And so this is not something good, but that means, it's kind of up to him to try and stop it. So he's conflicted. So I go around, and my streetwise really sucks, and I don't know the town well because I only come here once a month just for the certain things. So I'm kind of just wandering around town looking for a bar, and I end up at the Leaning Chair, which is like the roughest bar in town. And I go in there, and I ask the barkeep if he's seen a dwarf named Logan. Like, no, if anybody has it, it'd be those guys over there. And he points to the group of ruffians that I had just stopped in the street. And I go over there, and the little halfling stands up, and he's like, hey, what do you want? You better not be casting any magic. We're not in the markets anymore. And I'm just like, you're right, we're not. He's like, oh. And so I'm like, I'm looking for a man named Logan. Or I said something about, them stealing that package. And he just said, well, if anybody knows, it'd be, our boss, Jax. But he's, in jail now. Well, I think I'm going to pay him a visit. And they wanted me to join their gang. Because I'd be a big help to them. None of them know magic. And yeah, I probably would be a big help. Man, that'd be a character. I guess that'd probably be what my second character would do, the evil character. So I'm like, alright, I'm going to go pay him a visit. So I go over, it's like across the street, funny enough, to the council house where he's being held. And I go in, I look at the attendant, and I'm like, I need to speak with a prisoner that was recently put in here. And they're like just closing up for the night. So he hands me a piece of paper, and he's like, if you fill this out, we'll let you see him first thing in the morning. And I'm just like, this is of the utmost importance. And he's like trying to look under my hood, which is a common thing. Because, you're a hooded person. It's just like this. I'm also like 4'6", so I'm really short. But I'm also very slender, so I can't be a dwarf. I guess I'm closer to like a gnome, but... And so I'm just like, alright. Like, roll sanity. And I'm just like, I'm a friend of Elaine Magnet. And Ziggy told me that I was a friend of this guy because he was a friend of Cyrus. And Elaine Magnan is the commander of the city guard here in Stanton. So he's a good guy to be friends with. I'm like, yeah, I'm friends with him. Please, this is very important. And I think I didn't roll well enough on a diplomacy. So he's like, I'm sorry, I'll need to have confirmation from either, the commander or the captain, Captain Kill. And I was like, yeah, I could go get the captain and just, but I like working on my own, and I just. So I'm like, I say to the guy, I'm like, well, you could just tell him that I knocked you out. And honestly, he yelled for the guards. But honestly, I wasn't suggesting, like, I'm going to knock you out so in the morning you can tell him I knocked you out. Like, I was just saying, like, you could just tell them that I knocked you out. That way they blame me and you keep your job. But he thought it was a threat, which I guess didn't sound great. And so he called the guards. So the couple guards rush in, and I get into a little scuffle. But I handled it very well. I knocked one up into the wall, and then I was dodging all over the place, and I used shields, so I'm just blocking swords with my hand, and then I created this cold fog that just enveloped the room so they couldn't see shit, and then I just snuck into the back room and jumped out a window. It was badass. And then I went into a pool. There was a nearby pond. Literally, there was a nearby pond right near the council house, and so I just went in and just kind of I just kind of had my eyes peeping out, and so that's how I was. And I got away. And they were all the other guys were like, "Oh shit, man, you got it now." And when I went in there, I was, of course, I was hoping that I would get to speak to Jax, and I was thinking about that in my head. But afterwards, as I was thinking, I was like, really, that's how it should have happened. Like, I'm glad that it happened that way, because it makes much better role-playing. Because, keep in mind, since he became a bullywug, since he became a frog, he's had very, very little human interaction. Like, basically just the barkeep that he gets, I don't know why he was in there to get water, but we'll say, sure, he does that. So he knows the barkeep at the Rolling Barrel, and he knows the couple of vendors that he talks to at the market. That's it. He hasn't talked to anybody else. So he's, like, lost all of his diplomatic skills, but he hasn't really fully realized this, Like, he's lived in the swamp for the last 4 years. So part of him is still that Glenn, like, he'll tell people, if they ask, like, Glenn died that day and Frog was born, but there's still a bit of that Glenn in him where he thinks that he can just go into places and just act like a normal guy, or, somewhat normal, and still try to be diplomatic, but he can't anymore. And so this was a big lesson for him. Like, while he was just sitting in that pond, he was just like, I can't do things this way anymore. And so that, I was actually really happy with it. Funnily enough. I'm not usually happy when shit doesn't work. Okay, and so, man, oh man. I'm only, like, the party was split for almost the entire session. And I'm really bad at summing up other people's actions. So, basically, it was an investigation session, which, personally, I don't think is the best way to start a campaign. If you want my opinion, as perhaps poor as that is, as my experience as DMing, but if you want my opinion on how to start this campaign, I would probably have a zombie army marching on Stanton. Think about that. A zombie army marching on the city is the first session. Because, like, that's just like, that's just a crazy first session. You have a lot of action going on. You've got a lot of scrambling around. You're like, holy shit, this is happening. And then you have this huge epic fight. And then afterwards, then you get into the investigating where you're like, where did this army come from? And why did it just march on the city? Well, I don't know what he's got planned, but, that's how I would do it. Because that starts with a bang, and then you lead into the investigation, rather than starting slowly and building up, And, I don't know. It's fine, it's just how I would do things. And so, like, this, I think he was influenced a lot by Call of Cthulhu. He wanted these kind of investigations to go on. But that's great for Call of Cthulhu, because it's an investigation game. Dungeons & Dragons doesn't do investigations great, because your characters are built 100% for combat no matter what. It's fine, it really is, but he's had better starts than this one. And so they were scrambling all around town. They were following names and leads and stuff like that. And they went to this kind of curiosity shop. And they went to... they unlocked the book, right. They opened up the book. It was locked. They opened up the lock because the guy at the curiosity shop had the key for some reason. And so they opened up the book, and all the pages were blank. So they figured this must have been a fake. And so they went to talk to Jax. The captain of the guard found out that I had kind of roughed up some of the guards at the council house. And so he sent a letter off to Elaine Magnin, who's not in town. He was off on an assignment. So he sent a letter to him. And they spoke to Jax. They got some more information about some seedy things going down. And, yeah, they just kind of bounced around a lot. So I'll get back to me. I feel bad. I do. But I'll bring it all together at the end with all the information that we've all gained. It's just I remember my own stuff so much better. It makes for a better video. Rather than just, oh, they went here and I guess they found, Okay, so after they let Jax out. Ovum would have never done that. He would have let him out of living, maybe. They let Jax out. And so he went to the leaning chair. They left and they started heading to another inn called Bernard's. So I see them leaving. I see then Jax like come out of the leaning chair, and he starts following them. So I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna follow him. So I follow him, and he follows them to Bernard's. He watches them through the window, and then he starts heading off. And I'm like, all right, I got a lead here. This guy's up to no good. So I start following him, and we go all the way through town. And then we walk up to Castle Stanton, the big castle. And it's got like this, like a, not a driveway, but like a long empty road that leads up to the castle, very grandiose. And there's nothing on there. There's like nothing for me to hide. And so I roll, well, Ziggy's like, oh, Jax suddenly stops and he quickly turns around. And so I have to roll stealth with nothing nearby. And so I took an ability called Chameleon's Mask, which lets me use my Arcana instead of my stealth for once per encounter. And so I roll like a 28 or a 29 for that. And so basically I just like blend into the ground. And he looks and he... okay. Yeah, like, I'm perfectly just blended into the ground. And so he keeps walking. I get up and I keep following him. And he gets up to the gate. And he turns around again. And I'm like, oh shit. Because it's once per encounter, which out of combat is like once every 5 minutes. So I can't use Chameleon's Mask again. I have to rely on my stealth, which is a 5. And I'm like, oh god, he's gonna see me. And so I'm thinking about what I'm gonna say to him. And crit. Like, so he's like, all right, you blend into the ground again. He's like, okay. And so he goes through the gate. The guards let him through the gate for whatever reason. He walks up to the castle and he goes in. This is at nighttime, by the way. And so I'm like, oh, this is not good. And so there's a pond right alongside this road. And the pond, like, extends past the gate. So I literally just, I cast Water Stride, which lets me walk across water. And I just walk across the pond into the, by the castle walls. Not very well designed, but okay. And so I start looking along the walls, and I see a window, like, 50 feet up or something like that. And so I start scaling the wall. And this guard comes on his patrol, but I'm just like this. And he doesn't notice me, so I keep climbing. And I get up to this narrow window, and I hop in, and I'm in like this dark study. And then the door starts opening. And I'm like, oh shit. So I basically just hop right back out the window and try to hold on. I somewhat botch a couple rolls, and I let out like a grunt from exertion and stuff. And so this like 16-year-old kid comes to the window and sees me, and I'm just like, well, I'm going for a nighttime climb. And he's kind of amused by me, as teenagers might be. And he's like, you should get down from there. I won't tell anybody. He was being pretty generous to me. And I'm thinking about it for a moment. I'm like, okay, I could like hurt this kid, but that's not what Frog would do. That's not what he stands for. And he was a kid like this not too long ago. And so he's just like, very well. I'll climb down, but know this. There is an evil man in your castle right now. His name is Jax. He's like, oh. And so he runs off. I climb I start climbing down, and I see the kid below me talking to the guard. And I'm like, holy shit, he must be the Flash. And so they scuttle back off. I climb down all the way, and I go back to my home, my hovel. And that was my night. So I don't know what they did with that information. I'm just, it's kind of like the icy terrain thing. I'm just kind of doing my little thing and hope that it helps. I don't want to get too involved. Although I was about to just sneak through a castle, so... I think it was at that point that Frog was like, what the hell am I doing? Okay. While I was doing that, it was Captain Kill and Mert. They had got a lead that Logan was staying in the abandoned Trades Guild building. The old one. And so like, oh, well, I guess we should go check this out. And so they go over there, and they're like, should we be stealthy or should we just, knock on the front door? And they eventually decided, partly because of the Paladin's complete lack of stealth, they're like, we should probably just announce that we're here. I think that would be the best. And so they knock on the door, and they get no answer or anything like that. And so they just head in. And it's complete black and dark inside. They can't see anything, even with a low light vision. Well, I guess they can see a little bit, but not much. The only windows are like 25 feet up. And so they start walking into this building, and they smell just like rotting flesh. And I'm like, oh god, Ziggy's played a lot of Call of Cthulhu. if that happened to Call of Cthulhu, just run. Just run as fast and as far as you can, because you're about to die. And sure enough, they got swarmed by about 250 invisible zombies. Well, they became visible, but they just all of a sudden popped into view, and there was 250 of them. And rather than placing 250 minis, it was basically just 4 huge minis. Even still, it probably should have been more than that. But I think they were like congealed together or something. It was weird. And so they got into a fight. 2 versus 250. By all rights, they should have died. And in fact, Mert got pretty damn close. He did go unconscious for like a second. But they won. Amazingly enough. Like, I was really shocked. And really, they were the only 2 characters, I would think, out of the group of us, that had a chance at surviving that scenario. Like, any other combination of 2 of us probably would have died. And it was also partly helped by when Mert went down unconscious, he rolled a crit on his first death saving throw. I think that's what probably really saved the day. Funnily enough, from Mert. But yeah, no, they stacked on all these dots. Like every turn, when like the enemies started their turn and when they attacked anybody or anything, like they were taking all this damage, and they were taking all this radiant damage because he was a paladin, and for some reason, Mert had all this radiant shit because he's a good warlock. And Mert's like, your character sheet says you're good, but you don't have any radiant powers. And I'm like, yeah, that's the only way to tell if somebody is good is if they cast holy magic. Sure. And so yeah, they were casting all these dots, radiant dots. They were doing a lot of radiant damage, and these zombies were vulnerable to shit to that. And then they had a ton of healing. Like they healed like 3 times their health over the course of the fight. It was really impressive. It was really long too, but that's why having split combat, like, never a good idea, but it happened. And so they finally beat him. Towards the end of the fight, they started getting shot at by arrows. And I was like, oh shit. It's the Green Arrow, man. You guys are dead now. Maybe if you call the Flash, he'll help you out, but no. So yeah, I think Mert takes 1 arrow in the shoulder or something like that. And so they start using the zombies as like body shields to block the arrows. Not a good idea. Mert completely botches a fort roll. He rolls like a 2. So he catches like a disease. A zombie disease. And so he starts taking some heavy necrotic damage. And he fails all of his saving throws. And so he gets to like stage 2 of the disease. And the arrow person for some reason leaves. And they like climb out a window. They climb up and they climb out the window. So they're out and they immediately rush to the watchtower. And he's at stage 2 of the thing. So he can't be healed and he doesn't get to make saving throws. So it's looking bad. So he sends his guards to find like the best healer in town. He comes back. He looks this over and he's like, this is a case of the blight that, we thought was done with. And so they immediately put on, like, masks and shit, like, oh, God. And the doctor then talks to Captain Kill and gives him a couple options for dealing with this. One option is to let it run its course, in which case he will die. But he will be beyond the grave. So he will have his second life then. And, that's one way to do it. And, he'll retain all his memories and whatever his skills, but he'll be beyond the grave. In which case, Frog would kill him on sight. The other option is to have him ingest a special concoction of rare ingredients, which has about a 50% chance of curing him completely. Basically, no downsides. He's perfectly healthy, everything's good. It also has a 50% chance of killing him permanently, meaning no beyond the grave. Make a new character. That's a rough decision to take. If it were me, now, keep in mind this is the first session, so we're probably not too attached to these characters, but I like Frog, so if we're up to me, I'd probably... Actually, well, considering it's Frog, I'd probably take the concoction route, because Frog does not want to be beyond the grave. If he ever does become beyond the grave, he'll probably just seppuku or something. No, he's not for that existence, man. That's evil shit. So he'd probably take the concoction, so he either gets, life or death. That's very simple. It's not evil. And so then Captain Kill's like, there's a third option. I know this ritual, and I'm like, oh God. To contact some dark energies. But it does give a much greater chance of success for the concoction. And so basically, for the concoction, 1 through 10, you die. 11 through 20, you live. With the dark ritual, it's 4 through 20, you live. 1 through 3, you die. But it's a dark freaking ritual. Frog may have just killed him when he said that, because that's some warlock shit. Frog is the enemy of all warlocks. I promise you that. And so, they discussed this quickly with, the disease was really starting to take hold. He was about to, he was about to die, I think. So he was really losing, cognizance and stuff. And so he eventually quickly decided, he's do the ritual. And so, okay, he took him into a back room and he did the ritual. And Mert rolled an 11. So he didn't have to do the ritual at all. But he did. So he's perfectly fine, except he's kind of got a bit of a dark aura around him. Not really recognizable to the naked eye, but if Frog finds out... I'm channeling a little bit of Ovum, but not nearly as extreme as Ovum was. No, not nearly. Partly because there's no real religion, so... okay. And so that was pretty much the next day. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just pretty much sitting in my hovel because I really, that's what I do for the next month. I kind of just sit around, practice my skills, that's about it. Wait for any threats or something. And the rest of the group, they meet up, they discuss this stuff, and Gyro comes to the conclusion that, this Logan dude, he apparently went to that Bullywug's house first. Why would he do that? And maybe, if this copy of the book is like a fake one to throw off the scent, maybe the real one is still somewhere by his house. And so she met up with the other two, and they were like, yes, I think that's a good idea. First they arrested Bernard, because Bernard was the one that told them to go to the trade guild place. That's where Logan is. So they arrested him, they interrogated him, he was lying out his ass about everything. Like, they interrogated him. And through the whole thing, again, I couldn't stop thinking about Ovum. I shouldn't be thinking about Ovum this much, but he was such a freaking memorable character. I was like, alright, first off, he would have cut off one of his fingers just immediately, just to show him he's not screwing around. And then every time, like, he caught him lying 3 times. And I was like, every time he would have caught him lying, there would just be another couple fingers. Or an ear or something, just, Like, how dumb could you be? Like, he wouldn't have caught him 3 times, because there wouldn't have been that much lying. But this Captain of the Guard was kind of a pushover. And so, he's just like, I'm worried, I'm scared of what these people might do to me or do to my sons, and, it's terrifying. You'd do the same thing. Owen would just be like, no. And so they got some information. The key piece of information is that, according to him, the real person that's kind of running the town and doing all this kind of dark shit, especially with this book and looking for Logan, is the new royal consort named Serena Grey Skies or something. But yeah, she's evil. And so and they eventually they found out at some point that Logan is staying somewhere on the castle grounds in a secret place. And so they kept on asking him questions, and he said, like, that's all I know, I swear it. And they checked his inside. They checked inside one more time, and he's like, yeah, he's telling the truth. And I'm like, all right, well, that's where Owen would kill him then. That'd be the end of it, because he can't be redeemed. He's evil. But no, they let him go. I think even Frog, nah. That would be a tough one for Frog. He's not really into the whole maiming thing like Ovum was, but I don't know if he would just kill him. He'd probably let him rot in jail. But anyways, he's the captain of the guard. That's his decision. Okay, so they all meet up, and they eventually do find my hovel out in the swamp. I'm just like, go away. But they're like, this is about the book, this is about the town, this is important. I'm like, alright, I let them in, and they start telling me the whole story. Like, they tell me everything, which was good. And while they're doing that, Gyro goes looking around the swamp nearby to see if there's a book. And it takes her like 40 minutes with a very high roll, and I think like a fate dice. And she does find it. Ziggy made it really difficult, but I guess okay. So she finds the book like in a stump or something under dirt. It was crazy. And she brings it in. Like, I found the real book. Let's open it and see what's in it. I'm like, not in my house. Evil energy, man. And so we take it outside, they open it up, and sure enough, it's filled with text in Dwarven. The book is titled in Dwarven as well. Mert said it was the Cults of Warlocks, or Cults of the Warlocks. And I'm like, that ain't good, man. And sure enough, it's filled with text in Dwarven. And so they were discussing this, and he starts reading it, and it says in there, it's written by Logan. It says the only 2 people you should trust with this are Lean and Arthur Goldwright. So Lean, of course, and Arthur Goldwright is the Stanton archivist, so he's in charge of all the archiving. And they had met with him as well. And so they're like, oh shit. And I'm like, you should trust very few people in town. And I wanted to say, trust Elaine Magnan and lean. But again, Frog is very just, he doesn't want to reveal pretty much anything about himself. So he didn't want to say anything. And so they're discussing about what to do, and they're like, all right, I guess we'll go deliver this to Arthur. Talk to him about it. And I'm like, well, I guess that's enough for today. And I start heading back to my house. And they're about to leave, but they see a couple of figures in the distance, like sprinting towards town. And they point this out, and I see this, and I'm like, you brought them right to me! And I start sprinting after them. And again, I have Swamp Walk. So swamps, dude, I own that shit. And he's like, all right, we're rolling athletics. And I roll a 1. And I'm just like, oh, come on, damn you. Damn you! It's all Mert's fault. And so I don't trip or anything, but I think I head in the wrong direction or something, so they get out of sight. I'm like, damn it. So now I pretty much have no choice. I can't sit in my hovel because, they're just going to lead them right to me, and I do have an escape route out of there, but I don't want that. If they're going to do this, then I'll do it on their turf. So I start trudging my way to Stanton. They all follow me. And so we go to Arthur, and we go to the archives, and, they show this to Arthur, and they talk about it. And he's like, oh, I'll get started on a translation right away, but, perhaps, you lot could, keep an eye out while I'm doing this. I'm kind of nervous. And so they decided to stick around there and, protect him, basically, while this is happening. Not like anything would happen to him, right? And so I'm still very kind of distant to the whole group, and I'm like, I don't work well with others. And Captain Kill is like, we could use you here, Frog. If you stick around, I'd really appreciate it. And I'm just like, I don't work for you, Captain. He's like, I know you don't. But I'm eventually like, I think Frog is starting to get like, I'm in this shit now. Perhaps I could be of some use. I'm not allied. He's not allied with these people, but they do somewhat have a common goal. Now, Frog, of course, has his own goals, and again, if this were Ovum, he would just be like, well, that's nice, but I'm going into the castle and I'm going to kill this woman. And he would just say that, and then he would go do it. Like, there's no question about it. But Frog is much more furtive about it. And so he's just like, I'll return in an hour. And so, of course, that's also Frog's goal, is to go and kill the woman, but he's got to be much more secretive about it. And so Frog leaves, and then Gyro leaves to go bring Lean there. Like, she's worried about her, so she's going to go get Lean and bring her back to the archives. And I'm just like, oh man, that's going to be a weird encounter, like an awkward encounter. I've yet to speak to her in person since the whole shit happened. Like, I delivered the letter to her, and that was it. Because I'm completely ashamed. And her brother died in my arms, and I can't, like, oh god. I'm going to be pretty pissed, really. Like, screw awkward. I'm just going to be angry, because not only did they bring her here for this awkward encounter, they also brought her to this site of potential incredible danger. And so, of course, it's Frog's responsibility in life to protect her. She should be anywhere but here. But, yeah. So, yeah. So I head out, and I go back to the leaning chair, and I ask around there. I'm looking for Jax and his crew. I get some vague directions. I look around a bit more, and I find one of the guys from his crew. He doesn't know where Jax is going to be. All they know is he's going to be at the leaning chair in about 4 hours. I think Ziggy pretty much just did that because we're about to end the session, and he wants to get me back to the archives because there's probably going to be combat, and he doesn't want me to miss another combat. That's a meta concept, I guess, but it's fine. And so I'm like, fine. And so I head back to the archives. Well, what they're doing at the archives is they're like pushing all the furniture up against the windows and the doors. And Ziggy's just like, how can I not have a zombie horde attack? when you're barricading all the doors and shit. And I'm like, yeah, that's gonna happen. And so I went up, Lena's in there with the whole group, and I go up to the back door and I do this secret knock, and they're about to let me in, and that's where we ended the session. So I'll get my little conversation with Lena next time, and we'll find out what happens to the archives. We'll find out if I murder the consort, and we'll find out what's all this book all about, and boy, oh boy. And we'll find out that Mert is actually evil and I get to kill him. Twice. And actually, I didn't know as a player that there were some people that were beyond the grave that live in Stanton. I didn't realize that. If I had realized that, the session would have gone a little differently. I would have had like a nighttime hunting session. Because... like, think about it from Frog's perspective. He hates warlocks. Warlocks are undeniably evil to the core. Okay? And I'm actually about to run out of time, so I'm going to quickly sum this up. They're undeniably evil. They're most likely responsible for the zombie shit. Zombies in the town. He's there to protect the town from evil. Warlock's evil, zombies in town, zombies going to destroy town from inside. It's his responsibility to kill these zombies inside the town. So I think that's what he's going to have his nighttime hobby be after this, is going around killing these people that are undead, that live in the town just happy lives with their children or some shit. Hey, that's life, man. But, alright, so that was the first session. A little slow, guaranteed. Not incredibly fast. No zombie army marching on the town. But there were some fun moments, and I like this character. I'm looking forward to really delving into him, even if he's not as crazy as my other guys. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, yeah. That's every other week then. We're going to be switching off between Call of Cthulhu and this. So hopefully you guys can keep track of the two different campaigns, assuming you watch both, I assume. But, alright, so my name is Mang. This has been Roll Manging for our D&D campaign. And I'll see you fine folks in a couple weeks.